Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dev Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy, may all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Now we begin with that section of the chapter which deals specifically with the root problem, so to speak, in our spiritual life. These ideas have come before, but they all have been emphasized in the section that we are going to study today, the role of egoism and how it is at the root of the human existence. So we begin with verse 303. Yavatva yat kinchit vishadosha spurtirasti chet dehe katham arogyaya bhavet tadvat ahantapi yogino muktyai. So long as the body has even the slightest trace of poison, how can its health be restored? Similar is the effect of egoism on a yogi's spiritual freedom. The word yogi that is used here, don't go with the popular understanding of yoga, that one who does all the postures. The word yogi often gets used in the Gita as well as in the Upanishads and in many Vedanta texts as one who is a spiritual seeker, the one who is striving to attain the goal of life. So here is yogi is in that sense, that one who yoga, one of the meanings of yoga, which is primarily the focus in Vedanta, means joining. And here it's the joining of the Jivatma with the Paramatma, the individual soul with the Supreme Being. And so every spiritual seeker, therefore, is a yogi from this perspective. So, egoism, it's very clear, is the primary obstacle. There is one Bengali saying that Ramakrishna often used to quote, which translated means, when will I be free? When I, the ego, shall cease to be. That is, only when the ego disappears altogether, we can be completely free. And we know this from our own experience, because although our ego doesn't disappear permanently, it does disappear temporarily when we go to sleep. When we are in deep sleep, there is no sense of I. And we see that even through that temporary disappearance of the ego, our experience of deep sleep is wonderful. Yes, it's a state of, we are not conscious of anything, true. But at the same time, there is nothing limiting us in deep sleep other than our ignorance. Because it's very restful, it's very joyful. It's just filled with joy. That's why we have good sleep at night. We wake up next morning and say, oh, I slept so well. I feel so rested. I feel so happy. Now just think about that. If I can manage to eliminate the ego, even when I am awake, in deep sleep it happens naturally, without any effort on our part. But while I'm awake, while I'm fully conscious, if I can do something with this ego so that I can experience the peace, the joy of deep sleep, but while I'm fully conscious. And essentially, that is the experience of an enlightened being. An enlightened being is fully alert, fully conscious, and fully at rest. The body and mind of an enlightened being are active. That's why we see all of these great ones who were realized souls. It's not that, oh, I'm realized, but fully at rest. They don't sit in a corner whole day. We see Ramakrishna, we see Jesus, we see Buddha, we see all of these great ones, and saints and mystics also. They do such a lot of work, but they are fully at rest. In other words, we see them working. We see Shankaracharya writing all these commentaries. We see Jesus, Buddha, all of them going and preaching and helping people. It just seems like they are doing a lot. But that's from our perspective, those who are observing it, either in history or in real life. But in their perspective, they are not doing anything because they are not identified with their body and mind. Yes, they can see their body and mind. They know that the body is walking and the mind is doing all the things, but they know that's not me. And so that is how activity and inactivity can simultaneously be present, with me knowing I am the Atman and allowing my body and mind to do what is right and what is good. In fact, that's the ideal of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means I should continue to do what is right and what is good without feeling that I'm doing anything. Sometimes people don't do anything, but they want credit for doing it. So it's just the opposite. So here it's, I keep on doing things, but say, it's not me. Many of the Vedic rituals, these fire sacrifices, the oblations, the offerings that are made into the fire, at the side of that homakunda, that vessel in which that offering is done, they usually have a small cup. And so when they take this in a wooden ladle, they'll take this ghee and say, Indraya Swaha, Varunaya Swaha. That's all the different mantras they chant. Like, I'm offering this to Indra, I'm offering to Varuna. But every offering they do, like Indraya Swaha, then a little bit of that ghee, I mean, everything you cannot empty it. Some of it will stick to that spoon. And so they'll say, Indraya Swaha, and then in that little cup, they'll say, Idam Namama, Yamaya Swaha, Idam Namama, Varunaya Swaha, Idam Namama. So Idam Namama means, this is not mine. So I'm doing all these offerings, I'm doing all these rituals, but fully being aware, I'm not doing anything. It just doesn't belong to me. So you can see, even ritually, the idea of the ego or the striving to have the ego move out of the way is seen. It's not simply a philosophical concept. It percolates through rituals, through festivals, through all of these things. And so we have to be aware of this, because in a normal course of life, we see that our ego gets strengthened more and more and more. A little baby after birth, it takes a while, a few days, a few weeks for the baby to just have the sense of I. But then it just doesn't remain with that sense of I. Soon you see, this is my mother, this is my father. Then you grow up a little bit, these are my toys, this is my school, these are my teachers, these are my friends. And then as we grow up, the sense of I and my gets strengthened more and more and more. Now, if we just let it go, take its natural course, then it's just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And the stronger it gets, the more difficult it is to uproot. It's like this. When a plant is tender, you can simply uproot it with root. Easily done. But if you allow it to grow into a big, thick tree, then the root goes so deep inside, it's not so easy to uproot it. Now that's what has happened with our ego. It just seems like, oh, I'm Atman, I'm Brahman. God, my ego is gone. No, it doesn't. That false ego has become like a huge tree and the roots have gone deep inside. So a lot of work is involved. Now, this I, as I've often said, simply the sense of I is not that much problematic. But we very rarely have those moments in life when we have the I and nothing else connected with it. Sometimes, some of you might remember, sometimes you have really had a good sleep. And then it's like a long weekend. You don't have to rush anywhere. There is no hurry. There is nothing to be done. And so you have slept well. You haven't put any alarm. You wake up gradually in your bed. Maybe you look out of the window and maybe there's a beautiful spring weather and you see the flowers have come. And you can enjoy that. You have the sense of I, but you're fully at rest. And it's wonderful. So, but that simply the sense of I doesn't last too long, because immediately then, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to finish that, and I have to call this person, then finished. Then that sense of I is gone. That I gets attached to a lot of other things. The sense of duty, the sense of wanting, the sense of desire, the sense of responsibility, all come and cling to that I. And then, of course, we are stressed and exhausted by the end of the day. So one of the ways, one of probably the most powerful way in which that I manifests and becomes problematic is through the desires that we got. Because desire is nothing but a sense of wanting. I want this. Now, we will have seen in our life, mostly, we generally want anything because we feel we lack something. Because if I feel, it's like if you have had a heavy meal, if you have eaten a lot more than you should have, and then if somebody brings something more to eat, you normally would say, I would love to eat that, but I'm just full. I'm just too full. So if you're full, you wouldn't want, no matter how delicious the thing might be, you can't, you won't want to. Desire is an indication that I don't feel that sense of fullness within me. You're familiar with that very famous Vedic chant, Purnamadav Purnamidam. Purnam means whole. So that's our true nature, that we are full, fulfilled, as the people say. That I don't lack anything. If I don't lack anything, I won't want anything. If I don't want anything, then what should I have? There's nothing to desire. But that's not how we feel. We have that sense of something incomplete. I need something to complete me. And that's how desires come. And so this me, this incomplete me, is a way that's what the problem with I is. And that's how desires and the ego get together. And that is why in deep sleep, when this I is absent temporarily, we have no desires. We have no desires. Oddly enough, there is no karma either. There is no karma phal, nothing. Unfortunately, that state is so temporary that it doesn't help a lot. Well, if you get good sleep, that is some benefit, but beyond that, nothing much. But the sense of I generates this, and I've mentioned this several times before. The sense of I oftentimes comes along with the sense of not I, and therefore this sense of incompleteness. Brahman is full, one infinite whole. There is nothing other than Brahman. Brahman doesn't lack anything. Brahman doesn't want anything. The moment Brahman forgets I am Brahman, then I'm just become this tiny little human being and say, oh, I want this, I want that, I want that. And then all the problem starts. And therefore, in spiritual practice, often we are asked to minimize our desires, or ultimately to get rid of all desires. Because as long as they mutually reinforce each other. The more desires I have and the more I indulge in fulfilling of those desires, the stronger my I gets, the deeper its roots go. And the stronger my I gets, this I wants more and more things. So they kind of mutually feed upon each other. So what is important here, as at least the first step, is a purification of that I. And the best way to, because it's easy to speak about get rid of the ego, and everybody says get rid of the ego, and we know how difficult it is. So before we even attempt to get rid of the ego, it's easier to get rid of the ego when it is purified. And so a purification of the ego is what we need. And the best way to do that is to connect the ego with the divine, connect the ego with the spiritual ideal. And that's what Ramakrishna called the ripe I. So when I connect my ego, my sense of I with God, like looking upon God as the Father, as the Mother, that I am a child of God. A devotee might say, I'm a child of Holy Mother. Or as Hanuman thought of himself, I'm a servant of Sri Rama. So whichever way we can connect my I with the divine and try to remember it as often as I can throughout the day. Yes, my other I's will remain, but alongside my other egos, can I have an ego connected with God? Yes, I may be this, I may be that, but I am also a devotee. I am also a spiritual seeker. You see, as long as I have this kind of a spiritual ego, a spiritual I, an I connected with God in the uppermost chamber of my mind, it will be difficult to make any stupid mistakes. It will be, you see, we do stupid things when we forget what we should be doing. And we forget what we should be doing when we forget who we are. So if let's say, the idea that I'm a child of the Holy Mother, let's say, is an uppermost in my mind, then everything I do, I'm aware, this is what a child of the Holy Mother is doing. And if I have to make any decisions or make any choices in life, say, should I do this or should I do that? And then I can ask myself, what would a child of Holy Mother do? What kind of a decision a mother's child will take? What kind of a decision a devotee will take? What kind of a decision a yogi might make? So these are the ways we can purify the ego by taking it closer and closer and connecting it with the divine. And then it becomes easier to minimize our desires, or to put it in another way, to desire only those things that will help strengthen our connection with God. To desire only those things that will take me closer to God. For instance, a desire to pray regularly, a desire to meditate regularly is a desire. And there is a sense of I there. I want to meditate. I want to pray. But these desires are good desires because it's like someone told me a few days ago that they had gone to one of our very senior Swamis of the Vedanta Swamis. And so one of them told him, and he was emphasizing how we should try to meditate every day. And then one of the group said, oh, there's so much work, so I'm so busy, I just don't have time to meditate. And then the Swami said, what are the things in your life you have time for? And that's something we can ask ourselves. So because sometimes you think I don't have time for this, then I can ask myself, what are the other things I have time for? Is it really those things are so important that I cannot snatch even 5 or 10 minutes to pray or meditate? Is that really true? These are the kind of self-questionings that we can do. Verse 304. Ahamo atyanta nivritya tatkrita nana vikalpa samhritya pratyak tattva vivekadayam ahamasmiti vindate tattvam. One's true nature at Brahman is directly experienced when egoism is totally eliminated, all of the diverse identifications it generates are withdrawn, and the inner reality is discerned. All the diverse identifications are the one that are described in an earlier verse we studied, the verse number 297, identification with family, lineage, name, form, the stage of life, and being the doer and experiencer. All of these identifications are removed, are withdrawn when our true nature at Brahman is experienced. Because Brahman means the infinite one, the one that exists. If there is nobody other than me, then even the sense of I cannot stand. The I can stand only when there is not I or you, I or this. If there is no this, if there is no you, then this I is not an I. And therefore, Brahman being the one and only reality, the infinite reality, therefore there is no I in Brahman. And so our nature at Brahman is experienced when egoism, this little I, is totally eliminated. All of the identifications I just mentioned, they are removed, and the inner reality is discerned. Inner reality, the reality of my true being. Verse 305. Ahankare kartari ahamiti matim muncha sahasa vikaratmani atma pratiphala jushi swasthiti mushi yat adhyasat prapta janimriti jara dukkha bahula pratichaschin murtes tava sukhatano samsrutiriyam. You, the inner self, conscious and blissful, should give up immediately your identification with the ego, which is prone to change, in whom the Atman is reflected, and which obscures your true nature. Caused through superimposition, the I sense in the ego leads to this samsara filled with profound misery of birth, decay, and death. It's pretty self-explanatory. The identification of the ego with the ego, which is prone to change, in the sense that, while the sense of I remains, what that I is attached to changes all the time. When we are little children, we are attached to our toys. When we grow up, our toys are thrown somewhere else, and we have other toys to play with. When we grow up still more, there are other things we get attached to. So the I remains constant, attachment remains constant, but what this I is attached to keeps changing. That is what is meant by saying, which is prone to change, in whom the Atman is reflected. So the Atman gets reflected in it and begins to think of itself as the body and mind. It's like this. If I see my reflection in a in a tub or in a small little pond, generally we are sane enough to know that's only a reflection. But I am here standing outside, the real me is here, that's only a reflection. Now, what would you think of a person who looks inside a pond and says, I don't know how to swim. I'm drowning. I'm fallen in that water. And if that water is dirty, I think all this dirt has come over me. If there is a shark there, I say, oh, the shark is going to eat me. All kinds of things might occur if I think that's who I am. That is what has happened. In this pond of ignorance, the reflection of the Atman has fallen. And in that reflection, because that pond is not transparent, it's just filled with terrible water, the water of materiality, if you like, my reflection, I see myself as with body and mind. And so, the Atman being reflected in ignorance, the divine being being reflected in ignorance, the reflection looks like a human being. And all that we need to do is to say, that's only a reflection, that's not the real me. That's all. It's theoretically the simplest of things. Say, this is not the me. And then ask, well, the real me is inside. But we know, no matter how much it makes sense intellectually, how often we forget it. We remember it this moment, in the next minute it's forgotten. That's how the deep roots of ignorance and ego have gone within our hearts. Verse 306. Sadaika rupasya chidatmano vibhoho ananda murteranavadya kirtehe naivanyatha kvapya vikarinaste vinaha madhyasa mamushya samsritihi. Nothing other than identifying with the ego would have made this relative existence possible for you, who are eternally the same, infinite, blissful, changeless, consciousness, and of untarnished glory. Eternally the same because we are unaffected by time and place. Now you can see all of the adjectives given here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Eternally the same, infinite, blissful, changeless, consciousness of untarnished glory. That's not our experience right now. In fact, our experience is just the opposite. We are not the same from day to day, from morning to evening. We may be very active in the morning, in the evening we are like drained. Not the same. We change from season to season. We don't feel infinite. You can just go through the list. That's not our experience. And that is only because we have identified with the ego. Just let go of that and we are free. Verse 307. Tasmat ahankara mimam swashatrum bhoktur gale kantagavat pratitam vichidya vijnana mahasina sphutam bhungshvatma samrajya sukham yatheshtam. Egoism is this enemy which is like a thorn in the throat of one who is eating. Decimating it with the great sword of knowledge, enjoy directly and freely the bliss of dwelling in your own empire. Having a thorn in your throat while eating, not a pleasant experience. As long as that whatever is thorny inside here. If it's removed, it can be extremely painful. It can cause a lot of suffering. Egoism is that, like that. It's just terrible. We don't, right now we all have our own egos. We don't really feel that it's like a thorn. That's because we have gotten so used to it that we don't recognize it. It's like some days ago, I'd taken my car for the regular oil change and maintenance, and then they said, "Oh, the brakes look a little rusted." And I don't know anything about the way the car functions, and they said the ego is the ego. the brakes look rusted, and then I said, but the car is moving fine. I don't feel anything. It's not like, because something goes wrong, you'll kind of feel something. There's a stutter, there is a sound, there is nothing. The car is functioning just perfectly well. And so I said, so why is it then, if something is so wrong, why don't I feel it? So they are telling me, you've just gotten used to it. Come on, if there is a sound, you'll hear it. You won't get used to it. But anyway, they wanted to kind of put new brakes in it, obviously. Then I said, I want a second opinion. I took it to another garage, and then they said, yeah, it's kind of slightly rusted, but it's not something urgent. It can wait. It can be done later on, and so on. Now, that reminded me, it's like that, why don't we feel the ego as a thorn in the throat? Maybe we have gotten a little bit used to it, but it's not simply about getting used to it. It's also becoming insensitive to it. You see, sensitivity is very important in spiritual life, because all of these truths about even the ego and the koshas and the layers and everything that we are talking about, these are very subtle realities. Now, in order to see these subtle realities, to feel these realities, there has to be some sensitivity. That's why the word that is used in the Upanishad, in the Katha Upanishad, is Sukshmadarshi. The Sukshma means subtle. The Darshi, one who is able to see subtle things. So the Upanishad begins by saying that this Atman cannot be seen. But clearly, because it's beyond the mind, beyond everything, beyond senses, it cannot be seen. Then we said, then what's the point of studying all this? Then the Upanishad says, Drishyate. But wait a minute. This Atman is extremely subtle, beyond everything. But yes, it can be seen. But by whom? Drishyate tu agreya buddhya sukshmaya sukshmadarshibhihi. When the power to understand, the intuitive power within us, agra buddhi, it becomes pointed, one-pointed. Right now, we are so distracted by a million things happening around us that our ability to understand has kind of gotten diffused everywhere. So concentration, focusing it in one, agra buddhi, pointed, sharply pointed. Sukshmaya sukshmadarshibihi, and the ability to see, to understand, to grasp subtle truths. And that subtlety can come only through sensitivity. We know, even in a classroom, and many teachers know that especially, that the students in front are not all same, obviously. So there are some students, if they are like talking when they are not supposed to talk in the class, and if the teacher were to just kind of look sternly at them, then those who are sensitive students, just that stern look of the teacher, they'll know, oh yes, they should be careful. They're doing something they should not do. But there are some other students, they're like, no, nothing. They'll continue doing. That simply a stern look doesn't help. When the teacher has to scold them, stop talking. And then some of them might then say, oh, I don't want any more scolding, so they'll keep quiet. But there are so few, at least during my time, they were like, even if until the teacher would go with a cane and beat them, they would do it. So again, difference in sensitivity. But that's true in spiritual life as well. That the more we become sensitive to understanding these subtle truths, the easier it becomes. And that's what is meant here. Then we'll become aware of the ego as not simply something, oh yeah, we need to get rid of the ego, not that kind of, we won't take it so casually. Then we will see that the main hurdle in our spiritual progress is this strong ego inside us. And so decimating it with the great sword of knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge that I am Brahman. So knowledge that I am the divine being will get rid of the ego that I am this ordinary human being. The knowledge that I am infinite and pure and perfect will get rid of my present ego, which says I am this finite, mortal, imperfect creature. Enjoy directly and freely the bliss of dwelling in your own empire. Dwelling in your own empire meaning remaining absorbed in your own true identity as Brahman. In fact, there is one Vedanta text, it's titled Swarajya Siddhihi, attaining your own empire. So think about a king who goes to sleep one night and wakes up next morning with an amnesia, totally forgetting who he is, where he is, what he's doing. Total blank. But it's not total in some sense, because if it was total blank, then it's not so bad. Now in this king's case, this king has not only forgotten that he is a king, but somehow looks out of the window and sees some homeless person and says, oh, that's my brother there, and just runs there and says, oh, I'm a homeless person. And no matter how much the family tells him, no, you are not a homeless person, you are the king. And no, I'm this. Then finally they go and maybe get some Ayurveda Vaidya or something like that and give him medication, beginning on. Then he gets back his memory and says, oh, finally I got back my empire. I became a king again. Well, you are already a king. Even when you forgot you were a king, even that time you were the king. You had never lost your empire. It's just that you had mistakenly forgotten who you were and started thinking of yourself as someone else. And therefore, this is important to remember that when we say we become enlightened, we don't become Brahman. We don't become Brahman because we are already Brahman right this moment. At this very moment, every one of us is infinite. We are pure and perfect. We are not a part of this samsara. We were never born, we will never die. Does it help? We said, no, but no matter how often we are told this, we're like, no, okay, yeah, but right now, I don't feel that way. And so when we feel that way, then we will be dwelling in our own empire. Right now, because we have forgotten it, we are as if left our palace and gone outside and sitting in a homeless, as a homeless and saying, I don't have any empire. That's the idea. Also, look at this phrase, I like this very much. Decimating it with the great sword of knowledge. Vichidya Vijnana Mahasina. A similar imagery we see in the life of Ramakrishna. When he was learning under his teacher named Totapuri, who saw such a fit student for that highest state of non-duality, and so told him, get rid of all the forms in your mind and know that you are that infinite formless being. And Ramakrishna said he had no difficulty at all getting rid of all the forms. We have got millions and trillions of forms and ideas. We know how difficult it is. But Ramakrishna had no difficulty whatsoever. But he had one difficulty. He could not get rid of the form of the Divine Mother, Kali. He saw himself as the child of Kali. And she was so much a part of his being, of his devotional life, that no matter how often he tried, the blissful, smiling form of Kali appeared before him. And Totapuri said, get rid of all forms. And he said, no, I'm trying. It's not happening. And then his teacher said, you have got to do this. And finally, Ramakrishna said, he uses the word Vivekachudamani, using the sword of discernment. Vivekachudamani, the exact text that we are studying. So using the power of discernment, and it's a metaphorical, symbolical usage, that looking upon discernment or viveka as a sword, in his mind, he cut the form of Kali into two. And that was the only form that was standing in the way of his transcending all forms. And the happiest person in all of this must have been Kali herself. But that's what she wanted him to do. So I remembered that because he used exactly the same language there. Using here the sword of knowledge, he said the sword of viveka in that. So there are a few more verses here in this vein which goes discussing about the role of egoism. We'll stop here today. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, and you can keep your ego while asking the question. Otherwise it will be not possible to ask the question. Yeah.
Hariom Swamiji. Swamiji, if desires increase the ego, do desires then directly increase our attachment of our I with the body and mind?
Yeah, it's all interconnected. Yep. In fact, there is a beautiful verse in the Bhagavata, I think. It says, it goes like this in Sanskrit. Na jatu kama kamanam upabhogena shamyati havisha krishna vartmeva bhuya eva abhivardhate. And the idea is that desires cannot be fulfilled. No, desires cannot end by fulfillment of desires. Trying to fulfill a desire is like pouring more fuel into fire. And so sometimes we think, oh, I have this one desire, let me just finish it and then I'm free. We're never free. Every time one desire leads to more desires. And it's not necessarily, because I'm using the word desire in a much generic sense. Because desire is often thought of as wanting something. But there is a desire to even run away from things. Like if there is one fruit, I think it's available in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia and Singapore. It's called durian. And so some people love it. If that fruit is one, there is no middle ground about that. You either hate it or you love it, but you cannot be in the middle. So those people who hate that fruit, and it's really got, if those who hate it, they can't bear its smell, they can't bear anything about it. So in fact, there are, those of you who may have visited Malaysia and Singapore in those parts, there are some restaurants which put in big letters outside, durian not served here, so as not to frighten people away. So anyway, if someone doesn't like that fruit, then there is a desire to run away from it every time you see it. So that's a desire too. So desire is not always like wanting something. It can be also to run away from something. So desires, fulfillment of desire doesn't end those desires. What we need is a wise way to deal with desire. A wise way to deal with desires would be that to consciously cultivate good desires, because clearly one of the limitations we all have, and thank God for that limitation, is that at any given time we can do only one thing. We think we can do multitasking, never works. So at any given moment, the mind can hold to only one thought. So even when we think there are several thoughts in the mind at once, they're not really there at once. It's like one thought, boom, 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 boom. So they are not simultaneous, but they are one after the other. And because they come so quickly, one after the other, we think that they are present at the same time. So if I can consciously cultivate good, now again, it's a very relative term, good desire, bad desire. What is a good desire? What's a bad desire? And I like to just take a very simple approach to it. And that is the approach that Swami Vivekachudamani taught. That any activity or any desire, the fulfillment of which will make me stronger, either physically, mentally, emotionally, morally, intellectually, spiritually, that's a good desire. Any desire or activity which will make me weaker in any of these ways, that's a bad activity or a bad desire. So yes, if you feel I must take exercise every day, go jogging every day, good desire, because it's going to make me stronger physically, make me more healthy. Or I should have a good work-rest balance in my life, a good desire, because the more healthy I am, the more inner harmony I have, the easier it will be for me to do my spiritual practices. So if I can consciously cultivate good desires, I will have less time, less energy, less inclination to go for other desires which may not be so healthy, which may not be so positive, which may not make me stronger. And healthy desires, understood in this way, are much easier to transcend than the other kind of desires. So that's what I can try to do. Yeah.
Swamiji, for me it's a little confusing sometimes. I don't understand that when you say that we are the Atman, I'm the Atman, I'm none other than Atman. So where did this I come? And who is forgetting? So it's Atman is forgetting. From where I get separate from Atman and became an I. And if you gave the example of the king, if king can forget that he was a king, and came back, so there is no guarantee that today I realize I am the Atman and I can forget again.
Yeah. Good question. If I can forget once, then I can forget again. That's true. But when I know I am the Atman, I will know that I did not even forget once. That's the idea. That it did not even happen once, and therefore there is no chance of it happening again. If it happened, actually happened, then it can happen again. But if it didn't really happen, then it won't happen again. That's the idea. That if I once know that that rope in my room was not a snake, I'm never going to mistake it for a snake again. I will always know that's the rope in my room. And that's the idea. Yeah. Yes.
Swamiji, as we're studying this text, the way I'm thinking about what it's telling us is the ego. I think of the ego as a process in the mind that gives us an identity that marshals the energies of the mind. And I think of, the Atman or the Brahman as pure awareness. So if I understand what the text is asking us to do, is it trying to say, let go of your limited ego and should develop, for instance, a right eye, which would be a Brahman ego or an Atman ego. And so the idea would be to identify not with things of the world. Is that what the text is telling us? To identify with pure awareness at all times. And in that way, things will still happen, but your ego won't be identified with those. They'll be identified only with pure awareness. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really when I say I must identify with pure awareness, what does that really mean? What in practice, what would it mean? That identifying with pure awareness would mean that if I'm still seeing activity outside, my own body-mind acting, then they say, this is not me doing it. I'm aware of it, but it's the body that's moving, it's the mind that's moving. Sure, yeah, that's one of definitely a practice. That's what viveka means. That's what discernment means. That the movement, that the activity is in the body, is in the mind, not in me. Right now, without that viveka, without that discernment, I attribute the body's activity to me. That's why I can say, I am sitting here, I am talking, while all this activity really is being done by the body. Or I am thinking. Thinking is being done by the mind, but I'm attributing it to I. So that's where the confusion takes place. Yeah.
Namaskar, Swamiji. So now we are studying this text, Vivekachudamani. It says about Brahman. And if we go with the understanding of Bhakti Yoga, there we practice about our spiritual ideal. So, so what is this spiritual ideal then? Where in this Jnana Yoga path, where this spiritual ideal, in which layer it is? Is it a layer, or it is just part of Atman? What is?
Which one is part of Atma?
A spiritual ideal.
Ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ideal is the Atma. Ideal is my own true nature. And you can think it in terms of Brahman or Atman.
Okay.
And if that Brahman has pure awareness, if that awareness were to take a form, it's a big if that awareness were to take a form, then it will take the form of my chosen ideal. That's the idea. So even when, please sit down, even when the devotee meditates or prays to, even if it's a deity, a divine form and a divine name, the devotee sees that form, that if this pure awareness were to get condensed and take a form, then that's the form it would take. In fact, in the Vesper song that we sing every evening, which is composed by Swami Vivekachudamani, he refers to Ramakrishna as Chit Ghana Kai. Kai is the body. Chit is consciousness, pure awareness. Ghana, dense. Again, it's a very mystical language. That if that awareness were to kind of get so densely put together, if it were to take a form, that would take the form that I adore. So that's how a devotee can continue to think in terms of a personal form of the divine, and yet know that that personal form is filled inside and outside with that infinite Brahman awareness. So when I'm strong enough to be, or capable enough to be able to adore the formless as formless, that same form of my Ishta, my chosen deity, will diffuse into the formless. It will take me to the formless. Our prayer and meditation is a journey from the form to the formless, from name to beyond name. That's how the mantra is a sound, is a form, is a name. But that mantra and the form of the Ishta will take me to that formless infinite reality. So that's the way the two are connected. So the path of bhakti and the path of jnana, they might look in the way it is described in books as like different, but they are not really different. That's the idea. Yeah.
When we read Sri Ramakrishna's Kathamrut, in that he's having his experiences, where whatever means the experience of seeing Kali, Ma Kali. So Ma Kali. So he's seeing Ma Kali. So at that time, his ego was there, right? Because he's seeing it. So that is what he says, right? Ma Kali, or other people around him. For example, M is just describing that Sri Ramakrishna is uttering some words or chatting or talking with Ma Kali, like that, right? So is it like Sri Ramakrishna was one with himself, but we other people are seeing that differentiation between I and Ma Kali? Is it like that? Or is it?
Could be like that. Sure. Yeah, sit down. Yeah, in Ramakrishna's case also we see, he describes in the Gospel of Ramakrishna 3 states in which enlightened beings generally move. And that he calls them, one is the state when he's just sitting and talking with people. He's fully conscious of everyone around. Then there is the other state when he's completely in samadhi. Somebody had to hold him. He's unaware of the complete surroundings. But then there is an intermediate state. He calls it Artha Bhaya Dasha, in which he's aware of the surroundings, but a part of his mind is also above. In which case, that is why sometimes he would be in a samadhi, he is able to see the devotees in the room, but sometimes he is not able to speak clearly. So it's kind of an intermediate stage. So during the descriptions given in the Gospel, it's not always easy to know at this moment Ramakrishna was aware of his I or not. But just by this, he describes that these are the 3 ways. So it's not like either you have I or you don't have I. It could be the various kind of intermediate stages as well. In fact, even in prayer and japa and meditation, even in ritualistic worship, outwardly it does look like it's a dualistic thing. I'm doing puja, for instance. Here is the puja I'm doing. But if I'm completely immersed in my puja, completely immersed in my prayer, then you are not like every moment, I'm doing puja, I'm doing puja. That I is gone. Even during ritualistic worship, you are only thinking of the deity that is being worshipped. There is really only one in your mind. I is not present. In a deep state of prayer, I is gone. So it's not that the I disappears only in the path of jnana. Even in what seems like a I-thou relationship with God in the path of bhakti, when that deepens, when that intensifies, the I is not present. It's only that in the path of bhakti, in the mind of devotee, only the deity will be present. The one you are praying to, the one you are worshipping will be present. And in the case of the description that we are reading, it's only your own true nature will be present. But in either case, only one is present. Either the subjective pole of it or the objective pole of it. And so they look different in the description, but in actual practice, there is none. And that's why all of these great ones, whether it's Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi in more recent times, you will see that they were never like, I'm a jnani, I'm not this. You find that it's a complete harmony of knowledge and devotion in their lives. And so that's the ideal that's been put before us by both Ramakrishna, Holy Mother and Swamiji. Okay. So we'll stop here today. And when we meet next time, we'll begin with verse 208. 308. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Sunday on the satsang, a subject will be the happiness you curve. I have good news for you. For next 2 weeks, we will not have Vivekachudamani. So you'll have more time to be the Atman. And so we will meet on our Wednesday. We will have satsang every Sunday, clearly. Satsangs are not, they will be held. But Vivekachudamani will give a gap for the next 2 weeks. So next we meet is in the first week of May, on May 3rd. And Saturday we'll have meditation as usual. Sunday we'll have satsang as usual. Monday, be careful if you're coming into the city because there is a marathon. Any of you running for the marathon? No? Any of you are going to watch the marathon? Oh, good. That's good. All right. Okay, so let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.